Hey, this is CJ Holmes, independent real estate broker, founder of Homeowners for Justice. And just for a quick update, this is how you can contact me, hofj@cjholmes.com. You can IM instant message me via Skype at cjholmes11. Or you can call my office number, and my faithful, loyal admin, Gail, will talk to you, answer your question, call you back, get your emails, try to summarize what it is you're looking for and how we might be able to help. And if you have questions, we'll try to get them answered on the air. As you can imagine, we're getting inundated, and that's fabulous. That's what we need. And today, I know yesterday was the battle plan, and I want to do some really quick updates about that battle plan and some of the things that have happened. But today, after those quick updates, we're going to hear from Stu about what happened in Wilco County. I think it's Wilco City anyway, the Williamson County audit in Texas. And I will have that audit available for you to review. It's already linked on the webpage. I'm going to talk real quickly about the notary complaint page because it's changing every day, and I wanted to bring some highlighted videos to your attention. And then I want to share real quickly what's happening to get the word out. So the very first thing today is Stu. So Stu, this is CJ. You're on the air. Hello?
Thanks for
okay.
having me.
Okay, speak into the microphone clearly, please.
This better?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, great. Yeah. So I guess you need an update on Williamson County, huh?
Absolutely. Let us know what's going on.
Okay. Well, we put the word out. The court we went before the Williamson County Commissioners Court.
Okay.
One judge at least, I think another justice of the peace, and the other one, I don't know who they were, but there's about 5 people on the panel. They let us go, Dave Krieger, Dave Rogers, and the county records keeper, Nancy Reister, go first, which was great, because they had a lot to cover. It went really well. Of course, when we have a packed courtroom, it's hard to know politicians and when they're being sincere or not. But I think they're understanding the problem with MERS and the robo-signers and everything else that's involved with this mortgage corruption and stealing and all that stuff. So Dave did a great job. Dave Rogers, the attorney who wrote the opinion letter, explained things in judge's terms, I guess. And Nancy Reister expressed her concern with not only are the foreclosures a problem, to say the least, but the county has lost millions of dollars in recording fees, is probably what they're most concerned about, of course, but maybe not.
Well, and that's what I want to just interject here, Stu. I think that is a number that people can hang their hat on, so to speak. Okay, we lost recording fees, but what they've actually lost is all the value in the homes, as this bubble was artificially created and induced and then basically artificially broken so that they can take the land. That is the point. I have up here on the screen the page 1 of the executive summary of the audit, because you sent that to us. Thank you so much. And it is linked on legal action by state under Texas on my website. And I wanted to point out that in the audit it said there were 5,782 MERS-related assignments filed in the real property records. And the problem with these assignments, and what the assignment does, is assign the interest in the deed of trust and the underlying note. I mean, this is what it's supposed to do, to another lender, another owner of that note. And the problem is these MERS-related assignments, which have stuffed the recorder's offices across the country. They've got millions and millions of these assignments, okay? And they're all as bad as these here in Texas. They were robo-signed, which means they were fraudulent verifications of the contents of unread documents. They wholesale fabricated these documents, and the mortgage assignment issues is that by using MERS, remember yesterday, if you watched live stream yesterday, I ran the Kentucky Attorney General's lawsuit against MERS. And they call MERS simply a smokescreen behind which lenders can give themselves the property. And that's exactly what's being said right here. The use of MERS as the nominee for the lender and lender's successors without naming the lender of record. And remember, this is in a private database. There's nothing in the county records, right, Stu?
Right.
Yeah, they didn't file these assignments at the time. They just, logged into MERS and made a change. And so they don't tell you which lender has an interest in the property. And they use the MERS as signers because all the MERS corporate officers are just members of the employees of the member banks. And so the banks just give the property to themselves. And that actually goes into one of the questions I had today I wanted to quickly ask. One of the questions is, somebody wrote in and said, okay, I found that the notary that signed a document actually worked for the company that took the property. Is that legal? And the answer is no. No, it's not legal. However, they're doing it. They're doing it and getting away with it, and that's the big problem. So tell us a little bit more about what went on yesterday.
Okay. So the presentation went really well. Got the word out to where we had the commissioner's court. 3/4 of the people there were there for this issue. I thought the presentation went really well. I thought maybe they were a little bit soft on out now calling it what it really is, but I think they're trying to get the point across to the county commissioners as smoothly and as succinctly as possible, instead of just calling it out now theft and fraud and
right,
corruption and everything else that it really is. But it went really well, and it turns out that Nancy Reister got back to the office and already their phones are ringing off the wall.
Oh, fabulous, fabulous.
With people concerned about it. So, she might have, but she's a woman that, cares about this. She's actually a public servant. So, you just want to give her a hug and, ask her, how can we help?
Exactly. And Stu, you're telling us there's going to be some video coming. I just clicked to show on the screen the notary complaint page, and I'm telling everybody, these names are changing, the pages, and I'm trying to link them up and make better sense of what's actually on the page with the title of the page. And so I've converted what used to be false document affidavit into notary complaint, because that's what we're doing right now, is building the documents for the false document affidavits, and we'll talk more about that some other day. And you can watch yesterday's show if you had a question. But nevertheless, what I wanted to point out is that right here on this notary complaint page, because we're going to be directing everybody in the country to this, every owner that wants to try to fight back and stop their foreclosure or rectify an illegal foreclosure, you got to start here. And I've got here's the action we need from every recorder. This is an O'Brien, 3-minute O'Brien clip. Here's the action we need from every sheriff, and that's a 12-minute clip from the sheriff of New Hampshire. And here's the action we need from every attorney general. And this is the little clip, 12-minute clip we showed about the Attorney General of Kentucky filing against MERS. And so as activists and as sharing and spreading the word, when we talk about how are we going to get more people, because we want 1 million owners. We want 1 million owners to do this. If even 500,000 owners did this, we'd have a movement. But 1 million is a nice number. It makes sense. It's still just a fraction of the people cheated or going to be cheated on this fraudulent theft of homes. And I know that Randy and others, just like Stu was saying, we have to use other words, not fraud, because it turns the officials off. And one of the issues that Randy brings out about fraud is that it's so hard to prove. You have to improve intent. Well, how do you prove intent? And that's very difficult. So suspicious documents or documents with all these different signatures on them, that's what we're trying to do. So Stu, you're going to send us the links when the videos are ready, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Another thing that happened, they had two two local television stations in Austin, KXAN and KVUE, KVUE,
Okay.
as well as Dave hired a film crew to do the question and answer session in the next courtroom over when we were done with, when David Rogers and Nancy were done with their presentation. So that's all. I think it'll be edited down because some of the questions were not heard clearly. So they're going to edit it down, and they're going to, I think, post it as quick as they can, and that'll go viral within 48 hours.
And we'll do our part to help. We commit. We commit.
Yes, absolutely.
Thanks so much, Stu, for that. We look forward to the video. Hopefully we'll have something available by Friday, and maybe you can share with us any more action that you hear about that's going on. Because the bottom line is Texas is starting to make noise. Kentucky's making noise. Delaware, Pennsylvania, Massachusetts are making noise. Let's get the rest of the states making noise.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Stu. We sure appreciate it.
Yes, sir. Thank you. Bye.
Bye now. We're going to continue our show and talk about what I said today on the blast, email blast, the tweeting, and that is it's all about the money. It's not just about the money. Everything is about the money. It's about the fraudulent theft of our dollars, of coercing the people to use a form of exchange, a medium of exchange that requires debt. And that debt is debt to the bankers. And the bankers call it interest. They make money on every one of those certificates in your pocket. I don't want to call them a US dollar because they're not. Those, remember, we talked about this last week, and we're going to bring that discussion really to the forefront. I've invited Philip Beer back to talk to us about how we can wean ourselves off of that, this type of medium of exchange, the Federal Reserve notes. But in the meantime, I wanted to really quickly show you what the recorders are saying. I don't think very many have actually seen this, and I think it's really important. So we're going to play a quickie little clip here from John O'Brien. He's the registrar of Massachusetts. He's been one of the recorders leading the way.
Completely created an off-the-books registry of deeds because they didn't want you and your viewers to know what they were doing.
So the facts in that document very well could be completely false.
Oh.
Not the right owner of the property.
That's correct. There's no question about this. These banks acted as a criminal enterprise. They crossed state lines, they recorded fraudulent documents, they committed forgery, and they committed mail fraud. They used the United States Postal Service to mail these documents to registries of deeds.
So talking about what you're standing next to.
This is 22 variations of a robo-signer by the name of Linda Green. She was the woman who was the most notorious robo-signer. 22 variations of her signature. Now I ask any register of deeds in the United States, which one is the real Linda Green? So why would you record anything signed by her? You know going in that they're fraudulent. So all you have to do is call me up, I'll give you my affidavit, send it back to the bank and say, hey, sign the document that says this is the real Linda Green. They'll never do it. Never, ever do it.
Who's this over here?
This is an interesting one because, as you know, in April, they entered into the 50-state Attorney General settlement. And one of the issues of the settlement was the bank said they would say no more robo-signers. They sent one to me, and we're the no robo zone here. So you can imagine if they sent it to me what they're doing. This came in. Not only was it signed by Brian Bly as Vice President of City Financial Mortgage Company, it was notarized by Crystal Moore, also a known robo-signer, but now she's a notary public. And they flip-flop back and forth. Here's 4 examples of Crystal Moore's signature. Which is the real Crystal Moore? Here's 6 examples of Brian Bly's signature. Which is the real Brian Bly? Anyone in their right mind would send this document back and say, I'm not recording this.
So you think this is a direct violation
Total.
of the settlement?
No question. June 11th. And I sent it back to them and said to them with my affidavit, I've yet to hear from them. They sent it here.
And what's the penalty for violating that settlement?
Oh, it's criminal penalties. There's criminal penalties, but there's criminal penalties in forgery and in mail fraud, and it doesn't make any difference. The average homeowner, they'll be indicted. 5 major banks, nothing happened. And you have to wonder why. And the registers of deeds in this country and in your state have an opportunity to stand up and say, enough's enough, we're not doing this anymore. We're gonna join, we're gonna shut this right down today.
And if they don't do that?
They're gonna continue, they're not doing their job. You're elected, you take an oath of office. You stand there and say, I'm responsible for these records, the integrity and the accuracy of it. That's my job. That's the oath. We all take the same oath.
And you've done a lot of the digging here. You've started.
We've done it, we'll help anybody. We're on a mission. I mean, we're a one-man mission. With you know, my top assistant, Kevin Harvey, we investigate this stuff every single day. And we've helped the registers. But some of them just, I don't know why. I really don't.
We don't know why. We don't know why our register of deeds, and they were using any excuse necessary. I'm just a vessel, and whatever comes in and looks official, I rubber stamp it. And the facts are these. Every one of our registers and recorders' offices has millions of these forged documents in their files in the registry, and this is how they're taking the properties. That's why we're focused now on getting proof. The owners need to get proof. Obviously, the registers are elected officials, they're not stepping up, and this is a huge planned theft of the wealth of the people. It's really a land grab. They want to take the land. So the owners have to fight back. Whether you've lost your home already to foreclosure or not, please take go to this spot, the notary complaint. Philip's calling in. Distracted me just a minute. Anyway, go to the notary complaint page. Follow the rules. Number 1, 2, 3, 4. Go down the list. Do what it states. We've done the very best we can in getting sample Word docs that you can, download and edit to try to shorten the time period and effort for this. So, one of the questions, and of course, here you go again. O'Brien already had all of the fraud, different signature samples, the suspicious signatures for us. So somebody asked, she says, well, I've got this Brandon Brashears, and here is the package. It's got 8 different assignments or documents. They're either trustee substitutions or assignments or a notice of default, notice of sale that Brandon Brashear signed with all of these different kinds of looks. You can look yourself at the different kinds of signatures that they've got. They try to make them look alike, but they're very obviously different. And this is what we're doing. We're going after the notaries. I mean, O'Brien already just pointed out, these notaries are false. So let's go after the notaries. Let's file complaints on the notaries, because that then proves the violation of law. The owners need some help. That is what we're trying to do. Now, here's the suspicious documents. That's what I've called it now, suspicious documents and signatures. And if you scroll down, there's O'Brien with the 20 signatures of Linda Green. And then as we go on down, here's the list of names. So people are sending me their documents, and I will update them as fast as I can to add to this list. These are the packages of different signatures that should help owners in filing their notary complaints and in their suspicious document affidavits that we hope to have figured out by the end of the week. Now, again, it's all about the money, and this is the point. The fact is the Federal Reserve is a private company. It's owned by the banks. Most of the shares, I've been told, are Chase and Citigroup. And the government renewed their charter for another 100 years. So the people are stuck with this right now, but we don't have to use it. That's what I'm talking about. We can change the game. Here's another article. I'm going to link these, of course, on the comments after the shows, under the show's video, so that you can follow these links yourself. The Federal Reserve is a private company. You need to understand that there's nothing federal about it. And It is all about the banks. So I have gone through some other little video clips I want to share. It's really, really important that you follow this and that you see this. And you can always click the links after the show and listen to the entire episode if we don't play the whole thing. This is real important. This is the real truth of the matter, is that a financial element in the large centers has owned the government since the days of Andrew Jackson. And this was stated by Franklin Delano Roosevelt, U.S. President, in 1933. And I want to play just about 3 minutes of this for you.
1775, the American Revolutionary War began as the American colonies sought to detach from England and its oppressive monarchy. Though many reasons are cited for the revolution, one in particular sticks out as the prime cause: that King George III of England outlawed the interest-free, independent currency the colonies were producing and using for themselves, in turn forcing them to borrow money from the Central Bank of England at interest, immediately putting the colonies into debt. And, as Benjamin Franklin later wrote, the refusal of King George III to allow the colonies to operate an honest money system which freed the ordinary man from the clutches of the money manipulators was probably the prime cause of the revolution. In 1783, America won its independence from England. However, its battle against the central bank concept and the corrupt, greed-filled men associated with it had just begun. So what is a central bank? A central bank is an institution that produces the currency of an entire nation. Based on historical precedent, two specific powers are inherent in central banking practice: the control of interest rates and the control of the money supply, or inflation. The central bank does not simply supply a government's economy with money, it loans it to them at interest. Then, through the use of increasing and decreasing the supply of money, the central bank regulates the value of the currency being issued. It is critical to understand that the entire structure of this system can only produce one thing in the long run: debt. It doesn't take a lot of ingenuity to figure this scam out. For every single dollar produced by the central bank is loaned at interest. That means every single dollar produced is actually the dollar plus a certain percent of debt based on that dollar. And since the central bank has the monopoly over the production of the currency for the entire country, and they loan each dollar out with immediate debt attached to it, where does the money to pay for the debt come from? It can only come from the central bank again, which means the central bank has to perpetually increase its money supply to temporarily cover the outstanding debt created, which in turn, since that new money is loaned out at interest as well, creates even more debt. The end result of this system without fail is slavery, for it is impossible for the government and thus the public to ever come out of the self-generating debt. The founding fathers of this country were well aware of this.
And this I want to read. I believe that banking institutions are more dangerous than standing armies. If the American people ever allow private banks to control the issue of currency, the banks and corporations that will grow up around them will deprive the people of their property until their children wake up homeless on the continent their fathers conquered. And I believe that's Benjamin Franklin. I've seen that quote before. I'll correct it tomorrow if it's not. You got to hear this one. Here's the next. You just got to hear this. This is.
Well, in America today, we are getting closer to fully exposing the greatest con and cover-up in the history of this country. It involves our banks, the Federal Reserve, our Congress, and of course, you and me. First, though, think of the Fed as the godfather in this con.
I'm going to make him an offer he can't refuse. Just go outside, enjoy yourself.
The role of the Godfather, played by former Fed Chief Alan Greenspan, who appeared before the Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission this morning, denying that he ever knew what he helped perpetrate.
The notion that we in any way favored any of them or basically were influenced with respect to policy by what they said, other than the facts they gave us, which we always evaluated. I saw no evidence of that in my tenure.
And he may not have had favorite among the banks because Greenspan was working for all of the banks against you. The bankers, of course, the unrepentant con men being supported by the Federal Reserve.
She picked him clean. He never missed him. Remember that sting experience? How good you felt?
So good getting that money for free, getting away with it. Here's how the con went down. The bankers were operating under an implicit guarantee from the Godfather, the Federal Reserve, in the form of guaranteed low interest rates, guaranteed cheap money exclusively for the con men. Then Chairman Greenspan, the Godfather, would agree to hold those rates, let's say 2% for as far as the eye could see. The banks, or bankers, the con men, would borrow that money from the Federal Reserve, let's say 2%, and then turn around and lend it back to you at, let's say, 6%. That encouraged the patsies, you and me, to be drawn into the con because 6% looks like a pretty low rate. Low rates for houses, low rates for cars. Heck, you can join a health club, make that on payments, they'll turn that into bonds, and of course, promises of a higher than average return for those managing teachers and policemen's and judges' pension funds that are buying into the con as well. And here exactly is where the con comes in. As you and I both know, the banks had no money. They were getting it from the Federal Reserve, which is us. It's funny money. They had no capital to back up their lending. But that did not matter because they also had no risk in the lending. If the lending paid off, they win. And they won big when they did that because they did it with leverage. Top Manhattan executives alone paid themselves $121 billion in bonuses over the first part of the decade. Now, mind you, when the bank loans failed, they knew they were too big to fail. So the rest of us, you and me, would have to bail them out. The ignorant electorate, if you will, the patsies, who had no idea, and really still don't, understand how badly they are being conned by our government and our banks. Once the banks, however, realized there was no losing, the question was, how do we make the con bigger? How do we get more money through this crazy machine so we can get richer? The question, or the answer, I should say, is simple. Make more loans, more credit card loans. Think of all the credit card applications that were sent to you over the past 10 years. More car loans. It's the reason General Motors went upside down. It wasn't the cars. It was because they were running a financing scheme. Home loans, you know the narrative. So the people most hurt by this con, the home buyers, the cops, the teachers, pensioners who were suckered in by the bait of low credit and high returns in exchange for buying worthless toxic assets manufactured by the bankers. That's why your pension fund was wiped out. That's why the interest rate on your savings to this day remains around zero. If you're a retiree, you know what I'm talking about. It's also why you're now drowning in a mortgage on a house that's worth far less than you owe, because the bankers were happy to lend you money they did not have to drive up the price of that house because they knew the more loans the better, but no downside for them. So what's next? Higher taxes for us, higher interest rates for us to pay for the bailouts, while our government that was theoretically elected by us refuses to recover the stolen money by the con men or fix the system that allows them to continue to perpetrate the con against you and me. The current financial reform legislation proposed by our government would give the Godfather, the Federal Reserve in this case, even more power to regulate the game. The con men, represented by the Wall Street bankers, of course, giving our Congress a cut of the action, $344 million so far lobbying against the bill, second only to health care. And we saw how well it worked out for special interest on health care. Home run, they got a guaranteed customer base with no reform. I'm sure the bankers will do pretty well as well. All this, of course, while assuring our lawmakers, many of whom do not even understand how the con works in the first place, that the financial crisis has been fixed, of course, with an infinite supply of your money.
After all, just check out stocks over the past year. We are back over 10,000 on the Dow, thanks to that blank check from the Federal Reserve. So now, as we finally head towards Congress debating financial reform in our country, the question must be asked, does it make sense for our government to give more power to a Federal Reserve and banker con men who unrepentantly cause this crisis and make money at your expense on the pension side and
You there?
credit side. That's the current plan. Give them more power. Joining us now, Congressman Alan Grayson, Democrat.
I see your still picture, but I don't see
with Ron Paul.
you
See you
screen.
again and on the phone.
Bill Fleckenstein, president of Fleckenstein Capital, and more importantly, author of Irrational Exuberance, The Greenspan Bubble. Bill does an exceptional job of explaining exactly how the godfather, Alan Greenspan, allowed the banks to perpetrate this con. In fact, Bill profited rather handsomely betting against the con, knowing that it was a bubble. I know, Congressman Grayson, that you understand more or less everything that I just said and then some, and are likely more frustrated than I am at our Congress's unwillingness to actually acknowledge or understand the con or address it. Why do you think it has been so difficult and continues to be difficult for anybody in our Congress to really deal with this?
Well, I have the benefit of having worked as an economist for 4 years before I was elected to Congress, and that does give me some insight into how all this works. I think a lot of people on Capitol Hill simply don't understand how this works the way you just described it. Clearly, they should be listening to your show.
If you don't understand that the bank's incentive is to lend as much money as possible without any repercussions, because the only way they make money is with lots of lending or gambling, effectively, and everybody else's incentive is to try not to get screwed, and yet the Congress is feeding the money to those who have a directly adverse incentive. They make money by screwing over pensioners and borrowers, and our Congress is making that more possible, not less possible. How do we find ourselves in this situation?
Well, I think the fundamental problem is campaign finance reform. I'm not trying to change the subject here, but I do want to point out that we wouldn't have this problem except for the fact that lobbyists hand out $5,000 checks.
Bill, explain in the simplest sense why it is Alan Greenspan is so directly responsible for creating this con.
Well, first of all, let me say, Dylan, yours was one of the most succinct explanations of the problem that I've heard, so that was quite a good send-up that you did. Because Greenspan is ultimately responsible because, A, he was the one who put rates at a level that was too low and then refused, in the face of all evidence, to do anything to try to retard the potential for an asset bubble. He was in denial about the equity bubble and then turned around and created the the credit/housing bubble, and to this day refuses to accept any responsibility for it. When prices are held at an artificially too low of level by putting too much money in the system, that money seeks its way out into other places, and if you and it will end up creating a bubble. And the more leverage used in the bubble, the more dangerous it becomes. Greenspan not only made the interest rates too low, he advocated the policies and he cheerled for the housing bubble, for instance. He made a speech where he tried to explain why housing could not possibly be a bubble. So it was not just his conduct of monetary policy, it was the speeches he made, and he was held in such high regard, other people adopted his behavior and his philosophies.
Congressman Grayson, you mentioned campaign finance reform and the need to get the lobbyists out, because the bank lobbyists, $344 million, a cut of the action on the con goes to Congress. Are you as cynical as that would suggest, that basically Congress knows that they should create transparency and capital requirements, which would end the ability for there to be a con like this, but refuses to do so because they're afraid of losing those checks?
I think it's worse than that, actually. We lived through an economic disaster, and now we're slowly recovering from it. We lost 20% of our national wealth in 18 months, the last 18 months of the Bush administration, and housing topped out 3.5 years ago, not just in Florida, but around the country, and nobody has been held responsible, not Alan Greenspan, not anybody else. In Japan, they have a way different solution to these kinds of problems. It's called Harry-Carry.
I think what confuses people at this point, Congressman, and having been talking about this incessantly for a few years now, most people, if you look at the polling, understand at least enough of this to know that Congress works for the banks, not for the American people, and yet Congress still seems phenomenally willing to drag its feet in addressing this. Harry-Carry may be interesting or nice. We're probably not going to see it. We live in a democracy where we're told we elect people who look out for our interests, and yet the same people are creating laws that allow this group to con the American people out of the largest transfer of wealth in the history of the world with no consequences. Are you suggesting
Right.
special interests have so much control that our government literally is willing to facilitate that level of wealth transfer with no consequences?
I think that's a fair statement, and I would add to what was said before that we've got the creation of the idea of too big to fail under Alan Greenspan. We've got him gunning the economy through the Y2K money supply increase that led to economic disaster within 4 months. He made mistake after mistake after mistake, and what we never hear from any of these people is, I'm sorry. We don't even hear that. And I think it's because the system is enslaved. Yes, that's right. And the Senate bill unfortunately does that. The Senate bill takes whatever possibility there is of somebody who's actually looking out for the consumer and puts that in, of all places, the Federal Reserve as the one responsible to do that. The Federal Reserve, which is actually run by big banks, it's governed by big banks. They choose the people who occupy the seats of power in each regional bank. And yet we're going to be giving them more power.
Ahead, Bill.
Dylan, if the American banking system, if the directors and higher-ups there were held personally liable for some of the problems as they are in Brazil, for instance, and as they used to be in this country 70 years ago, then you might get a level of oversight on the banks and have them pursue policies that we would wind up finding less odoriferous. It's not that difficult. You just have to make the guys in charge personally liable for some of the problems, and some of this behavior would go away.
Any chance of that, Congressman?
Yes, in fact, we're working on a bill to do exactly that, and we've examined what happens in other countries when they make the kinds of mistakes we've seen the last few years in America. And it's not a pretty picture for the people in charge, either in Wall Street or in the Capitol.
Listen, Congressman, we appreciate your efforts on our behalf to correct for the con and get the money back and fix the system. And Bill, thank you for your journalism and your efforts to make sure people actually understand how this happened. Truly, Bill Fleckenstein, thank you.
And I want you to see the 3 minutes. Listen, we've got some friends. Look at this. Alan Grayson in Florida. We need to connect with these people. We need to build this movement. And so it is all about the money, the foreclosure crisis, the economic crisis. But we can change that game. This is what they didn't talk about, but we're going to talk about, because the answer is not just making them personally liable. That's as probably the best fix that could be come up with in the current system. And you notice what Iceland did with their banksters when they ruined their economy. They charged them criminally and put them in prison. There's a thought. And we of course can't yet, because the powers that be, our elected officials, are not doing that. You notice that just earlier this week we talked about the frontline exposure on the untouchables, and the very next day, you got a Department of Justice, Lanny Brewer, stepping down because he's one of those bankster attorneys. But let's never forget that Eric Holder is too. They both worked at the key attorney firm in Washington, D.C. for the banks. So there's many steps to this, and I think the movement, the people need to connect with people like Alan, and we need to support that effort. We need to get others elected that would support the effort with him. But also, we need to change the game. Let's remember, I've said this before, I'm going to say it probably every show. When you look at all those bank profits, all of that interest rate coming in of debt off of the currency that we're currently forced to use, that should be the people's money. That is your money, my money. It should be for us and for our benefit. Listen to this.
I am pleased that we were able to go join with Ron Paul, who introduced legislation to accomplish just this 26 years earlier, and get a full and complete audit of the Federal Reserve, which has now shown $16 trillion in money lent out directly from the Federal Reserve to institutions, various institutions, including many foreign institutions. About a third of the money, it turns out, went to foreign institutions. And then on top of that, another $10 trillion in currency swaps between the Federal Reserve and foreign central banks, which they had no way to recover if the foreign central banks weren't able to get the money back themselves. So altogether, $26 trillion of bailouts just in those two categories, not including TARP, not including FDIC financing of U.S. institutions. $26 trillion, that's almost $100,000 for every man, woman, and child in America, all done by the Federal Reserve without any act of Congress authorizing it. What they did is they took our money, the US dollar, the fact that they control the currency, the fact that they have control of the money supply, and for the first time in history, and I'm talking about in the 100-year history of the Federal Reserve, they played favorites. They said, we'll give $100 trillion to this institution, $100 billion to this institution, another $100 billion to this institution, and so on down the line, when you and I couldn't even come close to accessing that kind of money on those terms. They lent out this money at 0.01% interest. 0.01% interest. Go try to get a loan like that from your bank. It was corporate welfare, pure and simple, and what they were doing is they were playing around with the value of the money in your pocket and the money in my pocket. They were taking the US dollar and playing Russian roulette with it, giving it out in enormous, staggering sums in the hope that they might get it back. Well, they did get most of it back, but what about next time? What the GAO audit shows is that the Fed cannot explain why they chose one institution over another institution. All that anybody had to do was make noises about liquidity or stress, and somehow that would justify the transfer of billions of dollars of what amounts to your money and my money. You know, again, to give you a sense of what this is like, $16 trillion, $10 trillion, that's much more than the U.S. entire federal budget for the course of a year. In fact, that's more than all of the goods and services that we produce in the United States in the course of a year. The regional banks of the Fed are actually populated and controlled by the local banks. And all of these bailouts were actually administered by the Federal Reserve Bank of New York, which has on its board many Wall Street executives. I'm talking about current Wall Street executives, not the Tim Geithners of the world, the people who used to be or in the future might work for Wall Street, but the current Wall Street executives actually on the board making decisions about who would get what for themselves.